My guest today is Mary Lou Falcone, author of the book I Didn't See It Coming, Scenes of Love, Loss, and Lewy Body Dementia. And she is also the executive producer of the new film documentary, Facing the Wind. Now, she is an internationally known as a classical music publicist and strategist who for 50 years has helped guide the careers of celebrated artists like Van Cliburn and Gustavo Dudamel, Renee Fleming, and even Sir George Solti and James Taylor, and advised many institutions around the world, including Carnegie Hall, the Chicago Symphony, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, as well as the Philadelphia Orchestra, also New York and the Vienna Philharmonics as well. But combining communication skills with her background as a performer and educator, she now adds another layer, advocate for Lewy body dementia awareness. Now, her late husband, the illustrator painter Nicky Zand, who died from LBD in 2020, was the catalyst for her book as well as the film. So, the new documentary film about LBD, entitled Facing the Wind, a love story about people with Lewy body dementia, the spouses who care for them, and the remarkable community where they find sustenance and support, is our topic today. So, let's welcome famed publicist, author, and executive producer Mary Lou Falcone to the show. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Ward. It's really nice to be back, and I really appreciate this opportunity to promote and tell you about Facing the Wind.
Well, I will say this because I may play a little bit of favorites, but whatever you ever ask me, I will always say yes.
You are the best. Thank you, my friend.
Well, you're welcome. Well, let's talk about this because you are one of the executive producers of a new film documentary, Facing the Wind. What is it about?
So, Facing the Wind is about several journeys of several couples with Lewy body dementia. And it is their personal journeys told in real time, real people, real episodes. So there's a lot of reality to this, which we felt was the best way to show Lewy body dementia. Because if you can see it in real time with real people, you begin to understand what this type of dementia is all about.
Now, what is Lewy body dementia?
Okay, Lewy body dementia is a form of dementia which is the second most progressive dementia after Alzheimer's disease. It affects 1.4 million people in this country alone, and that doesn't count all the people it affects, as in their family, caregivers, etc. So it is a terrible disease that is differentiated from Alzheimer's by a couple of things. One is fluctuations. So with Alzheimer's, as we all know, it is a slow, steady descent. With Lewy body, you fluctuate in and out. One day you're 100% yourself, and the next day you don't know who the person standing next to you is. And it can go on for months being just fine, and then all of a sudden it kicks in with this non recognition factor. So that's a primary with it. It also is differentiated by REM sleep disorder. And that's where, when you're dreaming, if you and I are dreaming, we're just dreaming. We're not kicking or punching but in someone with Lewy body dementia who has REM sleep disorder as part of it, they begin to act out their dreams. So it can be very dangerous. If you're next to somebody in bed and they're dreaming that they're punching, they're indeed punching.
Wow. So, is this why it's so difficult to diagnose Lewy body dementia? Because of the fact that, like you said, Alzheimer's is a gradual decline and you can actually see it. And with all of the couples that are in this film, Facing the Wind, some of them had a very difficult time even convincing doctors that there was something wrong. And then even doctors who just kind of blew it off and didn't really seek to find out what the true problem was. Is that why this diagnosis is so difficult to come by?
That is correct. It's correct because it mimics other things. It mimics psychiatric disorders, it mimics Alzheimer's, and it mimics Parkinson's disease, which can coexist with Lewy body. So very often, for instance, my Nikki was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonian aspects. So it was Parkinson's and Lewy body that he had. To further complicate this, we have the comorbidity, the coexistence between Alzheimer's and Lewy body. Recently, in studies where there was the autopsies of Alzheimer's brains, they have found the published number is 40% of those brains autopsied for Alzheimer's also have Lewy body dementia present. My friends and colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania and also in Newcastle, England, tell me that that number is more like 60 to 90%. So there's a lot of coexisting of Alzheimer's and Lewy body.
When I read your book about your husband, Nicky, and I compared his journey with LBD to all of the couples in the film, your husband, Nicky's case, from what I read, was far worse than all of the cases that I saw in the documentary. But the documentary does showcase the roller coaster ride and the gradual decline. Can you give us a bit of insight as to what you went through in taking care of Nicky?
Yes, Nikki's diagnosis to death was about 16, 17 months. And that is fast. Most cases take anywhere between 3 years to 8 years. There have been on record, I know you're going to be speaking to Norma Loeb, who is the executive director and the founder of the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center. Her mom had it for 18 years. That's a long time. Nikki's is one of the shortest that I've ever encountered. So, as I said, diagnosis to death was 16, 17 months. It was, at the beginning, it was okay. In 6 months, we came upon the moment when I knew I couldn't allow Nicky to go out by himself because he had fallen on his way to the post office and came back with a black eye and bleeding and couldn't remember where he'd been or what had happened. And that was a moment where my breath just stopped. And I thought, well, we're going to have to institute a situation where I'm going to be there all the time. And indeed I was. And then pandemic happened a year later. We're talking now March of 2020. And the decline was very, very fast at that juncture. Nikki just kept getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And yet those moments of great cognition were back. For instance, I would sit here in my office, which is across the hallway from our apartment, and I would hear the piano. Nikki could barely walk, but I hear the rock and roll of the piano. It could only be one person. It was Nikki just rocking away. Or the poem that he wrote. He wrote an amazing poem about how it felt to be descending into Lewy body dementia. And I have it in the book because it described that when he passed the mirror and looked at it, that the horror that he saw was himself. So he realized what was happening. And then the moment came when he didn't know who I was. When I asked, do you know who I am, Nikki? And the answer was no, but that's okay. And then at the end, he came back to complete lucidity about 3 days before he died. He hadn't been talking, he hadn't been communicating, and I invited about 8 of our nearest and dearest family and friends to come and say their goodbyes. They did, into the bedroom, big hugs, whatever, no verbalization really. And then I heard a voice calling me as everybody was gathered in the living room. The voice from the bedroom, Nikki, of course, called me in and said, I need to get up. I need to go into the living room. And so I put him in a robe, in his little transport chair. I wheeled him in, at which point, Ward, he said by name, individually to everybody in that room, thank you, and I really appreciate you being here, and I love you.
Wow.
And then several days later, he was gone. So that's what this disease does. I mean, it kind of describes that roller coaster. And for Nikki, it was the roller coaster to the end. In the people in our film, what I'm so the word isn't delighted, but I am really proud that we were able in this film to show the different faces of Lewy body. You see two couples in real time on their journeys, and they're joined by a third couple, which you'll experience in Texas. So one couple was from Sacramento, another couple was from New Jersey, and the third couple was in Texas. And you see this disease manifesting itself so differently in every person profile.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed was that those suffering with LBD were men. And I have a very, very good friend of mine. His mother passed away from LBD. Do you know what the ratio is between men to women that have
I,
LBD?
I can't give you the stats, but I can tell you that with Alzheimer's, it's more women than men. And with LBD, it's more men than women. So, no rhyme or reason that I know of
Well,
yet.
that would definitely make a diagnosis extremely difficult for professionals to make. But that does kind of lead into needing more research between the two concerning gender. But with this film, why was it so important to make this one?
When I started on my LBD journey during Nikki's lifetime, it was it was with love and compassion and real um, discovery. I didn't know very much. I had trouble getting information. As you know, I wrote the book because I wanted to help people find information. I told my story, but in telling my story, it was to actually inform people about what this disease looked like, what it was all about. About a year into writing this book, so Nikki died in July of 2020, I started writing immediately. About a year into this, now we're into the fall of 2021, I joined the board of the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center as my contribution to give back. They had done so much for me, they were my lifeline. I needed to give back. And so I was asked to join the board. I said yes, with great pleasure. One of the first things we talked about was financing a film, being the fiscal sponsors for the film. So the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center is not the owner of the film, but it is the fiscal sponsor, meaning we raise the lion's share of money for this film. And
Ah,
so,
good.
okay, that's the distinction. And so we set on a journey in the fall of 2021 to see if we could do this. I called my very dear friend, the actress Mary Beth Peel, who was my lifelong friend and there when Nikki died with me. And she has always been my rock. And said, you're in the theater. Who do I go to for filmmaking? She sent me to a friend of hers, her friend that opened the doors to these filmmakers, these amazing filmmakers, Deirdre Fishel, who is the director, and Tony Hariza, who is the producer. We met, Norma Loeb and I, Norma from the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center, and I met with the filmmakers, and then we were joined by Linda Zapula, who's part of the film. She and her husband are one of the central forces in the film. And we all met and we agreed to agree. The filmmakers really liked the idea of what we were projecting, and Linda was willing, bravely willing, to have her home, I would say, invaded by filmmakers. It takes a lot of courage to allow filmmakers into your home, into your private life, into the journey that is so personal. I can raise the money. I'm not sure I would have had the courage to allow filmmakers in. But I do admire both Carla Prayer, who is the other lady who was so central to this film, and Linda for allowing these cameras in. And then by extension, to a gentleman named Curry in Texas, who opened his home up as well. So these people are the heroes because they allowed us in real time to see them. And in Curry's case, he is the person with Lewy body. In the cases of Linda and Carla, it was their husbands who had Lewy body.
Yeah, when I watched the film, I can understand why it is so difficult to diagnose because they each gave their own story. With one couple, took them 4 years to get a proper diagnosis. And then you bring up Curry, and Curry was a very interesting element in this film because when he talks, you have no idea and no clue that he's actually suffering with LBD. So with him, I'm looking at it as being one of those that have a very, very slow decline, where the others showed a much more rapid decline with the disease, which just really just adds a higher level of difficulty dealing with it and diagnosing it.
Absolutely. And I have to say that Curry is still with us. He is still very much alive and in Texas. And this is a spoiler alert, but the two other gentlemen, Jim and Patrick, who were followed in this, actually left this world during the filming. And so that is also shown in this film. The aftermath, what happens after the fact.
Yes, and then that kind of led me to a question when I saw the film. How long did it take to film this documentary?
It was 3 years. So the filmmakers started before we'd raised some of the money, but certainly not the bulk of it. But they took a leap of faith and they started filming because Linda and Jim were going to take a road trip. They had bought an RV. They were going to take a trip, hopefully coast to coast. That didn't happen, but they made it as far as Texas to visit Curry. Curry, who is Linda's podcast partner. They've been doing this for several years, but they'd never met in person. So this was an opportunity for them to meet, and they did. And this journey, because Jim's wish was to see as many national parks as he could before he died. And that wish was granted. He did see several, and in addition met Curry on the way. They were supposed to go as far as California, as far as Sacramento, to meet Linda and Pat. I'm sorry, to meet Carla and Patrick, but that never happened.
Yeah, I saw that the caregivers, they get on a Zoom together and they can voice their concerns, their frustrations, uh, as it's difficult for all of them. And it does give them a voice to get it all out without judgment. And what kind of support did you have when you were forced into this unknown territory?
Well, when I started, I tried to find information, and the doctor who had diagnosed this so brilliantly was useless when it came to when I asked him where do I go, where do I get help. He wouldn't answer me. So I started actually researching, trying to find help. And the actor, David Hyde Pierce, who is also one of my fellow executive producers on this film, and I will stop here and just say that there are several people who joined me as executive producers. One was the actor David Hyde Pierce, my friend, my other friends, soprano Renee Fleming, cellist Yo-Yo Ma, and the great philanthropists Susie and Bruce Kovner. So they are my fellow executive producers that I have to acknowledge because they have been friends and great supporters. But in those early days, it was David who said to me, "Do you know about Caring Kind, which is an Alzheimer's Plus organization, which I did not know about?" I began going to all of their support groups, meaning classes that they offered, not actual support groups, but classes on what does dementia look like, what do you do for people with dementia, how to legally you protect yourself, everything you can imagine. And I took all of these courses, and they were all free. And then they told me about this organization, the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center. And when I phoned, Norma Loeb herself answered the phone and asked me if I'd like to join their support group. And I said yes. And so I joined their support group. I made a suggestion that we expand support group to twice a month rather than just once a month, which we did. And now there are countless support groups that they sponsor and host, a lot of them, most of them online on Zoom. And they also have a website, which is just the best website on Lewy body dementia that you can imagine, lbdny.org. Again, that's lbdny.org. And their website is in 8 languages. And may I add, there's a 365-day-a-year helpline with a person, a real person, manning it. Those people who man the helpline are all people who have dealt with LBD in real time themselves.
I saw that. I went to the resource center and really researched it, and they do provide a lot of information for LBD and especially the caregivers of LBD, family members or friends. And, it's what is one of the most amazing things to me is, it was told that actor Robin Williams was diagnosed with LBD, but
No, no,
not, but now,
he wasn't, he wasn't diagnosed with LBD.
oh, he was not.
No,
Okay.
he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And in autopsy, they found that his brain was one of the most riddled with LBD that they'd ever seen. So they discovered his LBD in autopsy.
Oh, I'm glad you cleared that up because one of the things that was surprising me when I heard the connection of Robin Williams and LBD, that there wasn't a much higher press presence to explain what LBD was. But
Yeah.
now your test becomes your testimony. And do you feel like you are becoming the voice to raise great awareness about LBD?
I'm one of the voices for sure. I didn't know when I started this journey of being an advocate for awareness for LBD. I didn't know if one person could make a difference. I wondered. I thought I had to try, but I didn't know. I'm taking a big sigh because what I'm learning from the letters I'm getting, from the emails I'm getting, from people who stop me on the street, in a theater. I mean, this is a wonderful example. I was at a New York State Theater for the ballet in the spring, and I was at intermission minding my own business, and this woman came up to me and said, "Aren't you the LBD lady?" And I went, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I am." And she thanked me for something she had heard me say in a forum. And it was, so I know people are paying attention. I know people are being connected to this disease and are getting some information that they may not have gotten quite so easily had this journey not started. So between the book and the film now, which I'm so proud to be an executive producer on this because it's not my story that's being told, but it is the story of LBD through the eyes of people who really care and who are great storytellers.
Well, are there any advancements in the diagnostic of LBD?
There are. They have now developed a skin test where they take a very non invasive patch from the back of the neck, the back of the ankle, and the back of the knee. And they can tell if alpha synucleins, which are the rogue proteins that are Lewy bodies, I just call them rogue proteins because it's a whole lot easier for people to understand. And they're rogue proteins that attack the nerve cells. It's like wadded up paper in the nerve cells. And so this test can tell you now if you have it. I mean, is it 100% foolproof? No. But is it a breakthrough? Yes. Also, as you probably know and have read, Alzheimer's now has a blood test to test whether there's amyloid in your blood. And I asked, how long will it be before we have this same test for Lewy body? And I've been told like 3, 4, 5 years. So that's not so long. So being an advocate, being out there talking about it, allows people to spell it correctly, Lewy, which, most people couldn't even spell it, and stop the phrase Louis what? So that's number one. The more attention we pay to it, the more people will realize what it is, Dollars will be able to then be garnered for research. With research comes much more information and ultimately cure. That's the projected trajectory on this. And if I can make it a small part in this, then I will have done something of which I'm very proud. I call it my third act. It's my third act. It's what I am doing, what I have to do. It's not just what I want to do. It's what I have to do in order to make a difference.
Well, it is a climactic third act, I will say. And this film, Facing the Wind, is in a very early start, a very early journey. But at the moment, what has been the audience's response to the film Facing the Wind?
Well, the very controlled audiences, because we've kind of screened it very privately. Uh, Basically, there hasn't been a dry eye in the house. People have learned so much about Lewy body, and the challenge is please go out and spread the word. Now, the general public will be able to see this starting on November the 20th because we have been entered into the Doc NYC Film Festival. And so the world premiere is on November 20th. And then there is a screening link that the general public can join in on from November 21st to December 1st. And I'm sure that the filmmakers, Deirdre Fishel and Tony Hariza, will give you all the information on that because your audience can see it.
Oh, fantastic. Because it is a film that everybody needs to see. And one of the things that I appreciated was not just to watch the film because it's about LBD, but every caregiver needs to watch this film because they're going to take something back with them to whoever they're caring for. Maybe they're caring for a loved one with cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. A caregiver is a caregiver, and this film does highlight the importance and the struggles that they go through. Now, for you, what do you hope that this film will achieve for those who are caring for someone with LBD?
I think that what it will tell you as someone caring for LBD is number one, and most importantly, you are not alone. That's a very important message that I've driven home with the book, as well as the film is driving that home. Also, I think that no matter how much we strive to be perfect, none of us is perfect. You're going to lose it. And when you lose it, and you will, I promise you, you will, somewhere as a caregiver, somewhere along the line, you will have it way above your head and you're just going to want to scream. I advocate that you do scream, but you do it privately. You go into a private room, you have a pillow ready, you scream into the pillow. I'm fond of saying, heck, darn, and damn, don't do it. It's only the F word that releases all the endorphins. Not part of my general vocabulary, not a word I like, but boy, does it do the job. And then after you release everything, I recommend taking a lavender bar of soap or a sachet that's lavender. Inhale, be very deliberate in your inhale and your exhale, and then you're ready to go back in face the next round with a smile and with gentility and allowing the person who is ill to keep his or her dignity. Such an important word in all of this, dignity.
I think that is very, very wise advice. And ladies and gentlemen, with honesty, tenderness, and yes, sometimes humor, the film Facing the Wind invites viewers into the lives of people with Lewy body dementia and their caregivers. Real people in real time. Facing the Wind, a 60-minute documentary film, reveals how a mutual support community can be an antidote to despair, letting people know they're not alone. You will follow their journey, laughing and crying with them while taking an unflinching look at dementia care with its overwhelming and isolating aspects. Look, the struggle is real, but so is the love. So, ladies and gentlemen, Lewy body dementia is not a rare disease. It affects more than 1.4 million people in America, and it is the second most common form of dementia, but it still is being misdiagnosed. Alzheimer's disease is the gradual decline of memory, as Lewy body dementia is the roller coaster ride with the ups and the downs. One moment the patient can be fully present and lucid, and the next be completely lost or deal with hallucinations from mild to severe. There is no cure, but this very powerful film documentary is not for those suffering with LBD, but for the people who care for them. Many spouses and family members are thrust into being a caregiver and navigating the vast ocean of the unknown. So, facing the wind is a starting place for caregivers, and to know that it's okay to not be okay. So head over to the Lewy Body, and I'll say lewybodyresourcecenter.org or lbdny.org for more information. And if your loved one was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, you are not alone, and there are resources right now that can help you. Mary Lou, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing this incredible film, and to continue your quest to help bring education and some sort of peace to those caregivers out there with loved ones dealing with this devastating disease.
It is I who thank you, Ward, for this amazing opportunity to share.
Well, you are very welcome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, head over to lbdny.org to gain all the information you need, that if you're a caregiver, or to try to understand what LBD is all about. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.